You are listening to Unscripted Moments, a podcast about propaganda. This week we are discussing Adventures in Zoochosis, track 12 from 2017's Victory Lap LP. And before we get into this episode, I think that it is essential to note that Chris Hanna covered this song already on his Patreon. His episode on Adventures in Zoochosis is an hour and 46 minutes long. And in his episode, he talks about so many things in relation to this song. His personal connections to the song, being a parent, the cover artwork for the album, and the construction and the creation of the song. And it's absolutely a fantastic episode of his show. So you should definitely go to patreon.com/JesusHChris and become a patron of A Catastrophic Break with Consensus Reality. Keith, what do you think of Chris's episode for this song?
When I saw the poll for that, I just knew it was going to be the Patreon supporters were going to pick it. It was just so obvious because this song seems to like really strike a chord with so many people looking through YouTube comments and everything, like scrolling through way more for this than it seemed like a lot of other tracks. But it was a really enlightening episode, and I think it's just like you said, essential. It is a required listening. In addition, like if you love the song, you'll love the episode.
Yeah, I think that everybody should, if they haven't heard that, pause this, go become a patron of Chris's, then come back after you've heard that. So in light of the presence of Chris's amazing episode, which we encourage everybody to go listen to and prioritize over this podcast, just join up with Chris's Patreon. I mean, even if you like, I don't know if this is like super savvy to say, but toss him like $10, binge the episodes, and then if you can't afford it as a patron for your monthly budget, then I mean you can go. But it's so fantastic, and he's got so much great stuff over there, including all of his fantastic covers. So his Zoochosis episode is fantastic. And then interestingly, I saw today as well on his show that he released it pre-COVID-19. And then immediately went on tour to Europe after he released the episode. So what's so interesting to me about this is I wonder if Chris has experienced some new sensations related to zoochosis, the concept of zoochosis in his own life, in relation to essentially being confined to his house for the last 6 or 7 months with 3 other people. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it definitely makes sense on a symbolic, but also now kind of a literal level. And I think too, what's kind of a surprising addition to the Patreon is the community element. Just kind of scrolling through comments whenever Chris posts, but there's also just kind of, for lack of a better term, a forum that anyone could post something to. And people constantly share like great podcasts or articles or things that they discovered or just kind of side questions. And I think that part, like recognizing names there, but also like names that we know from, our show is just really cool. So there's definitely a great communal element that I think is really kind of taking shape and forming that's kind of continuing to grow. And I wanted to add to what you said, Greg, about the art before we get to the interviews. The photograph on the cover of Victory Lap, which this is our third. Is this our third Victory Lap episode?
Maybe.
Call Before You Dig.
Yeah.
Cop Just Out of Frame.
When All Your Fears Collide.
Fourth.
Awesome.
All right, so this is our fourth episode about Victory Lap, and we haven't talked about the art yet. Which is just a rather unsettling but powerful photograph of the Star Jet roller coaster. It seems like people also call it the Jet Star, which was the roller coaster it replaced maybe about 20 years ago or so, which is a casino pier in Seaside Heights, New Jersey. And the coaster was swept into the Atlantic Ocean by Hurricane Sandy in 2012. I mean, even here where I live in Northwest Indiana, they had to shut down part of the Indiana Dunes in Lake Michigan because of like the residual effects of the storm here created just massive waves. So it was swept into the ocean, but it remained mostly intact. And you can clearly see a flag on the left side of the coaster if you look up a picture, if you look at the album cover. But that wasn't a part of the original design. In 2013, a guy named Christopher Angelo climbed to the top of it and placed an American flag to raise awareness for shore recovery. He was arrested afterwards.
Wow.
And, Hurricane Sandy damaged or destroyed something like 325,000 homes in New Jersey. And FEMA, which is the Federal Emergency Management Agency, it's an agency of the federal government's Department of Homeland Security, gave New Jersey and New York homeowners like $1.4 billion. And that was almost all for housing, temporary housing, hotel rooms. And New Jersey got an additional $1.2 billion in like block grants. But, and this took my breath away reading about it, Sandy left $36.8 billion in damages in New Jersey alone, which is more than half of the total $71 billion in damage caused by the storm in more than 20 states.
And New Jersey's so small as well.
It's just, I can't wrap my mind around it. It kind of reminds me of the fires, going on out west, that here it's like I'm on a different planet, like I see it on the news and I read about it, but it's just so different here. It's hard to even to understand the scope and the scale of the devastation.
Yeah, well, and also I know that Chris talks a little bit about this, but that photo was taken by Tom Brennan, who is a photographer who now follows around the President of the United States. And Tom Brennan's Instagram page is an incredible variety of photographs over the last couple of years. But the photograph on the cover of Victory Lap was taken by Tom Brennan, who you should definitely go and check out because his work is poignant and intriguing and captures the eye with a lot of artistic vision. So yeah, awesome. That's really cool information about the cover image. So that's really cool. So the title of this tune has the term zoochosis in it. And obviously that's broken down into two terms. So we have the terms zoo, and then we also have this ending term like osis. So these terms can be broken down as zo, meaning animal, and then osis, meaning abnormal condition. So it breaks down as an abnormal condition among animals are confined in abnormal spaces as well. So that's just a little breakdown of the term itself before we get into the episode.
Yeah, and I had never heard that before. Before I heard this song, and I gotta say, Greg, I was super stoked to be able to talk to professional wrestler Sami Zayn about punk, about activism, about using his platform to raise awareness, for what's going on in Syria, to challenge his fans, and of course, propaganda. And this song, "Adventures in Zoochosis." If you're not a fan or familiar with wrestling, Sami won the WWE Intercontinental Championship at WrestleMania 36, and he had his title script back in May, I think, while he was staying at home during a COVID quarantine, which the WWE faced a ton of backlash for that. But he just returned to SmackDown saying that he's the real champion. I got to applaud him for sticking to his guns and digging his heels in, because if at first staying at home was and being by myself, being kind of an extrovert was a little hard, I'm just stubborn in this point.
Yeah. Nice. And I really do love your interview that you did with Sami. So I'm excited to bring that. And we also have a second guest on this show, which I am very excited about. And so this episode does have two guests, so this is kind of a big one for us this time around. But our second guest is Dr. Chris Jensen. Chris holds the position as associate professor at the Pratt Institute in Brooklyn, New York, where he teaches courses and conducts research in the fields of ecology and evolutionary biology. He received his PhD in ecology and evolution from Stony Brook University in New York in 2007. And Chris is here on the show this time around to specifically discuss the concept of zoochosis, biologically speaking, evolutionarily speaking, and how he sees zoochosis as an evolution and ecology professor and researcher, but also as a parent himself. He talks a lot about it too. So I was pumped to be able to chat with Chris. So all right, so this is double interview episode. As you all know, our episodes are long. And just a little tip to listeners out there. If you look at our show notes in the podcast app, I always do my best to add timestamps to our episodes. So the timestamps show where interview portions take place and where the two of us, me being Greg, and then Keith being, Keith over here. So that's where we break down the song together. So if you are, interested in times, you can always find the timing breakdowns in the show notes. And if anybody ever notices that I forgot to put in the timestamps, feel free to shoot us an email or a message on Instagram or Twitter or something, and we will put those back in. So since we have two guests, we're going to go ahead and dive right in. It's going to be two interviews back to back. First with Sami Zayn and second with Dr. Chris Jensen. So without further delay, please enjoy these conversations and we will be back afterwards.
I don't even wait. And when you're starved, they let you do it. You can do anything. Whatever you want. Grab them by the pussy. I can do anything.
We're going to build the wall. We have no choice. We have no choice.
Sami Zayn, welcome to Unscripted Moments, a podcast about propaganda.
Yes, thank you for having me. As I was just saying, it's kind of exciting for me too, because I don't really have anyone to talk propaganda with. So it's kind of fun for me too.
Yeah, I think for me, this project has been such a cool experience because other than maybe being somewhere and having a shirt on at a coffee shop or at a show, someone might say, oh, hey, cool shirt. But I've had such a great opportunity in like sitting down and chatting with so many different people because of the podcast. It's really been an unexpected kind of a surprise and, pretty rewarding in that way.
Yeah. So the t-shirt experience is funny because that's about the depth of that conversation. If it's at a coffee shop or something like that, it's, oh, you too? Cool. All right, well, have a good one. And then that's it. You don't really get to delve deep into like the song meanings and stuff like that you guys dissect on the podcast. So it's cool to just be able to delve deeper and really, bounce these ideas off one another, because a lot of times when I read the lyric sheets and stuff like that, I'll also, and this isn't exclusive to just propaganda, but a lot of bands, you have your interpretation of what they mean. And then when you talk to someone else, like, oh, hey, okay, whoa, I didn't know that.
Yeah.
And even when you asked me, this is a little insight into my neuroses, and you asked me what song to discuss,
Mm-hmm.
and I was very indecisive because I'm like, oh man, how do I pick just one?
Right.
And I'm very indecisive with little things like this. Like if I go to a restaurant or something, I'm horribly indecisive with big menus. Big life decisions, I'm very decisive. But little things like which propaganda song do we talk about? I mulled it over for days. And even right before we talked, I was looking at some of these different song options. I'm like, oh, what about this one? What about this one? And I was rereading the lyrics to Potemkin City Limits. And I always interpreted that song one way.
Mm-hmm.
And then I reread it and I'm thinking, well, who is this Francis? And then I went down the rabbit hole. I'm like, oh, this song isn't even about a person.
Right.
It's about an animal. And I really like that song. And I've listened to it a lot. And even then I was misinterpreting it for the longest time. So, again, it's not exclusive to propaganda, but you always have your interpretation of these songs. And then you sometimes find out different meanings, maybe what the songwriter meant by it or what he had in mind, or just other fans' interpretation. So it's just fun to be able to delve much deeper and get your, because you guys are obviously enthusiasts, to say the least, or if you have a whole podcast dedicated to the band. So you guys have your interpretation. So it's going to be fun to dissect this particular song and hear your side of things.
Yeah, I think so often the t-shirt experience is kind of like the pointing Spider-Man meme. Like you kind of just have that acknowledgement, right?
Yeah,
Like,
yeah,
oh yeah, you too, you're in the punk or you're in the metal. And
yeah. But there's something to be said about that too. Just the
for sure.
acknowledgement of, hey, same, cool, you know?
So, how did you discover music, and not just, music as entertainment, but as an avenue of self-improvement, whether that's punk, hardcore, or something else? I'm curious, like, what kind of got you deeper into like underground or kind of
Mm.
thought-provoking music?
You know, that's a tricky one. My relationship with music's funny. I guess I didn't. I didn't grow up in a very musical household. I grew up in a very religious household, actually. So I was brought up Muslim, and music just wasn't a part of my life at all until, I remember, I think the first song I remember hearing and liking was Bad Medicine by Bon Jovi. And maybe I was 5 or something. And I was like, whoa, this song's awesome. And then, what's the other one? There's Pump Up the Jam when I was also about 5. So these are my earliest memories of song. And then when I was 7, we moved to the suburbs and I discovered a radio. And I discovered the radio. Like, whoa, Mix 96 and listen to all these songs. And I discovered, taping songs off the radio and making these compilations of songs off the radio. So, and it really resonated with me. I became very musical, I think, in my early childhood. And then, like everybody else who gets introduced to punk, somehow it's, a friend from school or whatever. And I had a friend, his dad was a DJ, and I've talked about this particular friend on other podcasts, because I think in retrospect, looking back now, I find he was very ahead of the curve in that he this is pre-internet and pre-everything, and he was always kind of like, oh, this band and this band. He was always kind of on the cusp. But he always kind of knew what was the next thing. And have you heard of this band? Oh, well, if you've heard of this band, there's also this band that apparently influenced them. And you remember being young and reading the punk, like the thank yous, and they would thank all these other bands, and that's how you heard about other bands.
Right.
So you kind of explored bands, and you're Canadian, right?
No, I'm American. I'm from, so Greg and I are both American. He lives in Buffalo and I live just outside of Chicago.
Okay. So I don't know if you remember or if you've heard of HMV. No. Which is just a really famous record store in Canada and England. I think they're out of business now, maybe. But so HMV, back when we were younger, had this policy where you could just return things. Like you would have CDs and you just bring them a stack of CDs, like 10 CDs, and be like, hey, I got these for my birthday and I don't like them. And you could just return them and get 10 new CDs.
Oh, wow.
So this is how we discovered a lot of these bands. Just, had whatever CDs lying around, or you bought them from a pawn shop or whatever. And then you go back to HMV and be like, yeah, just, I didn't like them. And they would just let you, sure. Okay. Just crazy. And then actually this really came to a stop once CD burners became a thing. Once you could copy CDs.
Right.
So that kind of put, a halt to all that. But anyways, it's just, I don't know, not to get too off topic, which I do a lot. So rein me in if you feel the need to, but
no worries.
I kind of discovered punk through this friend, maybe when I was 10, 11, and Green Day exploded. And then you go down, kids went down the rabbit hole from there, and Rancid and NoFX and this and that. And so the first time I heard of Propaganda, I want to say was on a Fat Records compilation. I want to say it was it Survival of the Fattest, which I want to say is maybe volume 2 of those Fat Wreck compilations, and Nation States was on that. And so I was maybe 13. And I remember the first time I heard that, I mean, first of all, I just thought it was so cool, right? I mean, the opening verse is so cool, and you don't understand. I'll be honest. I don't think I fully understood that song really into my 30s. To the extent of how accurate it is. I just didn't understand the depth, but it just sounds so cool. when you're a kid, publicly subsidized, privately profitable, it was so cool. And they're using these big words. You're like, whoa, these guys, this is some next level stuff. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I think I definitely was singing along with that in my 20s, still just kind of parroting the words, but not really having an in-depth understanding of it.
I didn't know what a neo-colonial was,
right.
Well into my, last 5 years, really, to really understand the depths of what just those first words, publicly subsidized, privately profitable. Just those 4 words. I mean, to understand the depths and how far reaching that is, and actually when you asked me what song I wanted to talk about, that was one for that reason, because it was the first song that really opened my eyes to propaganda, and a song that only now do I really understand the depths of. And then, this is something I marvel at a lot. With certain songwriters, like the Beatles are a great example. Some of the genius that they wrote, and then you think back and they were like 23 when they wrote it, like Paul McCartney and John Lennon were writing these songs at 23, 20, 21, whatever, in their early 20s. And you're people are still studying this music and whatever, talking about it all these years later. So it's the same thing when I listen to I Know How to Clean Everything is sort of their big album that, a lot of people love. But for me, it's less talk. Less talk, more rock, because I think that one is just, you want to know what it's all about. It's all on that record, and to think that, Chris Hanna was in his early 20s writing that stuff. And it's only, again, concepts that I'm kind of understanding now in my mid 30s. It's just pretty remarkable that he had that presence of mind, or that these concepts at such a young age.
I think so many of those ideas I'm still kind of unlocking now. And if people have kind of pushed back on some of our critiques of, how to clean everything, or some things on Less Talk, but even with that, I never would have been able to say those things or understand those things at the same age. And this podcast has really helped me, I think, value the early stuff far, far more than I did, 2 or 3 years ago, because I see all of these common threads interwoven, and it's not just the self-reflection or the human concern in the later albums. It's there early on too. It just sounds a little different, or it's just worded a little differently.
Yeah, and it sounds like, you're kind of, and this goes with any artist that you sort of are along on the ride with for their journey. You kind of see their personal evolution as well, and you piece together a lot of their personal journey through interviews and things like that as well, and where they're at in life at different stages in their career. And, you certainly approach things one way when you're 21, 22, and you certainly have a different mindset when you're in your mid 30s or you have a kid or whatever else. So it's interesting to watch that. But I do think that the overarching ideas are pretty much there, from Anti-Manifesto all the way to Victory Lap. It's not like a total abandonment of any sort of ideology at any point.
Right.
It's still pretty consistent throughout, but maybe the approach changes a little bit. Like for example, on Victory Lap, that one song, Letters to a Young Anus.
Yeah.
Right. It almost sounds like a letter to young Chris Hanna in a way. Just in how you go about things, I suppose. It just changes as you get older.
So kind of going back to the, Spider-Man pointing meme, seeing them live for me is such like a visceral mix of emotions. There's like the excitement. I always kind of waiting for them to start, or any band really, is like the feeling going up a roller coaster, and you're just kind of waiting in anticipation. There's excitement seeing them perform my favorite songs, but there's also anger thinking about like the issues and topics, screaming out the words. Also feeling less alone, right? Being around others who share a lot of the same values. So do you have any good stories about seeing them live?
Well, I've only seen them live once, and it was recently, pre-pandemic. What was it? September of 2019, maybe, which feels like a lifetime ago now.
Right.
It's so crazy to think that was less than a year ago. So that was my first time seeing them live. And I think they were kind of on my, they might've been the last band on my bucket list of, must see.
Mm-hmm.
They're still alive. And in their prime, they're in their prime. They're in their musical prime in a sense,
Agreed.
So it's pretty crazy to see. And yeah, it was really great. And one thing that's interesting is because there is sort of a different, even though let's say they fall into the punk or metal genre or whatever, there's still sort of a subculture of like Propagandhi fans, which are going to be a bit different from say Less Than Jake fans. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So it is always interesting when you show up to an act that you've never seen before. And and again, maybe this is my personal experience, not yours, but because I never delved too deeply into any particular subculture, which is a whole thing, maybe from my upbringing and the way I was brought up. And, I've never dove too deeply into any particular thing. I've always felt like a bit of an outsider from any, like if I went to punk rock bowling or something like that, I mean, I'd take inventory all around and I'd be like, whoa, I'm the only person without a tattoo here,
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
like,
Same.
I never, I never subscribed too much to the dress code or the whatever. I always kind of looked at things a little bit with an outsider's perspective. And maybe that's by design, rooted in whatever my upbringing, but I've always kind of stood on the outside and kind of observed. And so when you show up the first time to any particular act, you're like, oh, so these are the people.
Yeah.
So this is the audience. Okay. It feels a little different from, NoFX or, the Beatles or whatever. And you kind of, it's just funny. You watch the dress and you watch the, I don't even know how to describe it. Just there's a mood, and there's it was interesting. It was interesting to see the other people that were there. And I'm sure it was very different from, let's say in 95 or 96,
Right.
when it was still like, cause by now they've made it pretty clear, they've made it pretty clear. They were pretty adversarial, I think, towards a certain part of the fan base that was showing up. Let's say that they were like, "Hey, look, we don't want that type, or we don't care about that." They've made it pretty clear, I think, over the years. So now, if you're seeing them in the year 2020, I think a lot of the I don't know, skate punk, meathead, whatever type fans aren't there as much.
Yeah, the macho scene seems to definitely not have a presence. If people are moshing, it's definitely like middle-aged dad and mom moshing. Someone picking each other up if they fall or saying sorry if they bump into someone too hard. It's definitely not like really aggressive or macho. Yeah,
and this is a little off topic, but what's a really interesting band to see live? Just talking about that weird mix of subcultures is the Dropkick Murphys. I don't know if you've ever seen them live.
I know I haven't.
It's such an interesting mix because there's 60-year-old people there who are, the Irish folk part of it. And then there's also just people there's punks. And then there's also just jock meatheads who love shipping off to Boston and just want to this is a chance to fight and whatever and just get drunk and rowdy. It's just such a crazy mix. But it's interesting. Anywho, all this to say, so that was the only time I'd seen them live. And it was pretty cool. I mean, their performance is obviously excellent. They're excellent musicians. So when I don't know, there was an energy there too. It was just great. It was really great. And I remember now every time I hear it, back to the Motor League, when I hear it now and I listen to it, on MP3, when you've listened to the song now, I'm always taken back to that part when I saw them live. And that scream, when does it come in?
I know what you're talking about.
You know which one I'm talking about?
Wow!
Yeah, right before play acting and kissing mommy's little skinheads. Right before that, there's this scream. And Sulin hits this scream. And I just remember, man, I got hit with it when I saw it live. I was just everything stopped. And I thought, whoa. I'm getting goosebumps even now just talking about it.
That's awesome.
I was floored. I was like, oh, man, this is so good.
So before we dive into just one specific song, I'm curious, as an athlete, as a performer, How do you
Yeah.
see your role, your responsibility to raise awareness on social issues, challenging your audience? I think like so many punk bands like Propaganda do, challenging people to dig deeper, to think more deeply. How do you see your role in that?
I do feel a small sense of responsibility. There's always 2 or 3 different sides pulling at each other, and I feel like that's just my existence, is just a lot of inner turmoil. Because sometimes I'll just be like, what's the point? What's the point? Who cares?
Mm-hmm.
Who cares what I say on social media and what I'll say this? And then people will go, the people that agree with me will go, yeah, hell yeah. And then the people that don't agree will not agree. And then like, what's the point? What am I accomplishing? I can't even tell you how many times I've written out tweets and spend time on them, because there's a character limit. So I'll spend 10-15 minutes on working out this tweet, and then I'll just be like, well, what's the point of this? What is this going to accomplish? Nothing. So I just don't send it. And then there's other times when I think, well, this is an opportunity, because I'm sort of in my I don't know if you want to call it wrestling prime or whatever, but I have the platform now because I'm currently in WWE now. And I know that my worth, and this is a whole thing we can unpack another time, but my worth to these fans is really just contingent on the fact that I wrestle for this one company. And not all the fans. Certainly I have like my fans that have followed my career for many, many years, because I've been doing this a long time. But I would say that's a small amount of people when you're a mainstream pro wrestler, It's just people care about you if you're here and now. And if you're not, you're kind of out of sight, out of mind. So I realized, okay, this is a golden opportunity to kind of use this platform. It is a privilege to have this platform. And that really became apparent when I was doing this, because I'm of Syrian descent as well, with the war going on in Syria. A few years ago, I reached a boiling point, or I reached sort of a like put up or shut up kind of point, where I realized, I think it's awful, but what am I actually doing about it? And so then finally I took some steps to actually do something about it. And I launched this campaign to working with this non-governmental organization called SAMS, which is Syrian American Medical Society, who do a lot of work on the front lines in Syria. And with them, I partnered with them to fundraise to launch a mobile clinic to deliver medical care to internally displaced people who are living in these refugee camps in Syria and whatever, or have no homes to go back to. So that was the first time I really saw the power of social media, because when I launched that campaign, we were able to raise a bunch of money, and it had very real and very positive effects. And it was tangible. I could see it. And so that made me think, well, man, it's like, you got to do this if you can. You can't just let it go to waste. So, and that's really the battle that goes on within me of like, what's the point? And well, there is a point. But I think that goes way deeper than just social media. I think that's like an existential battle of, is there a point? Yeah, there is a point.
A much smaller version to relate that, I would think, is just the Thanksgiving dinner for my family. Like, do I really want to get into things? Like, is this going to create positive change, or is it going to create more drama for myself? Or do I still hold up, my character by still, calling someone out on something? And like, I couldn't imagine that, times, to whatever exponent to have to manage that with a much larger audience.
Yeah, well, and so that's similarly, there's also the issue of, following the news or reading up on politics or sociology or history or whatever, because it can be infuriating. It's just so saddening and so disheartening, to the point where it could really make you lose faith in humanity altogether. When you really dive into just how awful things can be. And sometimes I wonder, why am I doing this to myself?
Yeah.
Why? Like, the expression ignorance is bliss. There's a lot of truth to that. And if you but then I have, again, this internal battle of like, well, you can't stay uninformed, but then can't you? You know, like it's pretty great to just not worry about it.
Yeah.
It's pretty great to just not worry about it, but then it just goes against, I don't know, this thing inside of you that's like, no, this is not right, and you have to know about it, otherwise they'll get away with it. You know, even though what am I really doing by learning about it? But then I think at the end of it all, what I've kind of come down to is that, you know, this knowledge and accruing this knowledge is important, because if it's handled in the right way, which it seldom is, and I'm including myself because I get emotional and I get, how could you think this and how could you support this?
Oh, for sure.
Don't, you know, and you just fly off the handle, because I think at the end of it all, if you go about it the right way and you're armed with information and you've learned to give a coherent response to a sometimes ridiculous point of view, then you maybe do have a chance at even changing one or two minds, you know, or to your point, which is the whole point of this question about feeling a sense of responsibility to challenge my fan base, or to bring up issues to my fan base that maybe wouldn't be interested in it to begin with. I do think there's value in that. You know, I do think there is value in that. And again, I've mentioned this one with regards to the whole Syrian mobile clinic campaign. I could have very easily just donated some money on my own the one time and not really made a point of it, and not, you know, just done it anonymously on my own. Here's some money and I'm doing my part. But in fact, there was so much more value and so much more power in raising awareness and raising funds, and we were collectively able to raise so much more money and do so much more good when it became a collective issue. When I raised awareness to this issue that people otherwise had no they had no skin in the game. I have skin in the game. You know, I have family in Syria. I have my roots in Syria. My lineage. There's a personal connection there. But for a lot of, especially mainstream wrestling fans, and if you don't follow the news, you have no connection to Syria. So all of a sudden, I'm bringing this issue to you, and you're like, well, wait a minute, that is awful. I'll donate some money, sure. And now when we all pool our money and our resources and whatever, we all get together, we can accomplish so much more. So I do think, to answer your question in a very long-winded roundabout way, I do think there is value in bringing up these issues and in continuing to, for lack of a better term, fight the good fight, you know, even though I don't really feel like I'm fighting very much sometimes when I think of the amount there is to fight out there. You know, I feel like I'm not really doing my part, but there's something to being mindful. There's something to staying aware. There's something to bringing these issues up and discussing these things and reaching an audience that maybe otherwise would not have questioned or thought about these things. I do think there's value in that at the end of the day. Otherwise I wouldn't do any of this.
Yeah, I think you brought up something important, like the burnout, like the mental and emotional burnout part. You know, I'm an 8th grade history teacher, so I walk a really fine line in trying to introduce my students and challenge their understanding of history, but also helping them navigate what that brings about in them, like the emotional part of it. And that's not easy. Like, I think so often when those ideas are challenged or their understanding is kind of flipped on its head, there's this reactionary, you know, like if in elementary school, they get like this patriotic version of American exceptionalism where they don't question anything. Like, I try to make sure that it doesn't necessarily swing completely in the other way to where they think America is now uniquely evil, and then like making little 14-year-old cynics. So trying to help them understand that, like, while there are terrible things, you know, the purpose isn't to necessarily feel bad or to feel angry, but it's to understand it as much as possible because it deserves to be understood.
Yeah, I think that's a great way of looking at it. And So I read this book one time. It was Chomsky. It was a book called Optimism Over Despair. And I think it was like a collection of interviews or something with him, really, I thought, yeah, that sounds great. I would love some optimism over despair. That sounds right. Just what the doctor ordered.
Where do I sign up?
So I read this book, and I recently read another book that similarly, I think a lot of these, it was 300 pages or whatever it was of here's a reason to despair. Here's all that's wrong with the world. And then the final 5 pages are, yeah, well, but what can you do? We have to be optimistic because what other choice do we have? And I was like, what? I thought I was going to get 300 pages of reasons to be optimistic and not despair. And instead I got 300 pages of despair with 5 pages of, well, what are you going to do? What other choice do we have? And that's really what it comes down to is like, what other choice is there? What other choice is there?
Here, I got a somewhat related but a less heavy question. If you could pick any Propagandhi song as your entrance music, what would it be?
I don't know. I love the beginning of Dear Coach's Corner. That it's like waking up in a war zone.
Yeah.
It's like just madness, right? Bah, 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 bah. That'd be very cool to walk out to, but then Dear Ron McLean, it kind of goes off track. So I don't know, but musically that one's pretty rad. Back to the Motor League would be pretty cool too, because it's got, one of the coolest opening lines. Just, I like to party fucking hard. I like my rock and roll to sing. That's all right. Let's do this. That actually would be a very good. And it's funny because I listened to your interview with John Darnielle, picking apart that song. And it's funny because you guys kind of pointed out how it's almost making fun of the subculture while simultaneously inviting them to participate,
Yeah.
But for that reason, for the participatory reason, it would make a great wrestling song because, like, fuck off, who cares? There's that chanting,
right,
sort of, participatory thing, which is really what wrestling is totally at its core, just that, come along for the ride kind of a thing,
Well, you kind of already mentioned that you had a hard time narrowing down our conversation to just one song. So you finally settled. And when I say settled, of course, I just mean picked. Adventures in Zoochosis from 2017's Victory Lap. So why this song?
Well, because I think it touches on something, and you mentioned it earlier, that I think is overlooked with Propagandhi, and maybe not, but I think so. Because of their political stuff, it's very easy to just look at them as a political band or whatever, or it's very easy to miss something that I think is the genius, one aspect of the genius of the songwriting, or of the message that's lost in the band a lot. And it's something, again, as you can probably already tell, that I wrestle with a lot, which is it's not just here's the disarray of the world. It's not just that. It's not just pointing out everything that's wrong with the world. It's also trying to reconcile that with yourself,
right,
and your role in the world. And there's a couple of lines in that song which I'm sure we'll touch on when we break it down here. But it's that acknowledging, and again, this is something that only really recently started to happen in my life, because I feel like it's layers of awareness. So the first level of awareness is recognizing something's wrong. And then you're like, oh my God, this is wrong. And then it opens up Pandora's box. I'm like, wait a minute, all this stuff is wrong. The criminal justice system is a disaster. The economy is a disaster. All these systems are, everything's wrong. And it just becomes like, oh. And then the deeper you get into awareness, you're like, wait a minute, I'm all wrong too.
Wow.
Yeah. It's like, first you see it in everyone else, but then the next level of awareness is seeing it in yourself. And so there's a line in there that really hits me. Is just when he's talking about, especially when he directs the conversation at his kids, when he says, Boys, I bowed to the keeper's whip for so damn long. I think the sad truth is this enclosure is where your old man belongs. Oh man, I gave you goosebumps. It's realizing that, you know, even this world that you have all this resentment towards, you're still a product of it, and you enjoy it. And there's a guilt. I don't know. Maybe I don't want to put this on other people. Maybe I'm projecting, but there's certainly for me, you know, and again, I'm so scattered, and I apologize. I'm excited, so I'm running a million miles an hour here. But you know, one of the another song I'd mentioned to you to maybe do, or no, I'm sorry, I didn't mention it, but you had already done it, was "Resisting Tyrannical Government."
Yeah.
Because the final lines of that song hit me like a ton of bricks when he says, "Yes, I recognize the irony. The system I oppose gives me the luxury to bite the hand that feeds. But that's exactly why privileged fucks like me should feel obliged to whine and kick and scream until everyone has everything they need." So it's like that hit me like a ton of bricks, because it's it really realizing that even though there's this system and you have all this resentment towards it, at the end of the day, you're a product of that system, for better or for worse. And a lot of you can't omit the better half of that, you know? And so when he talks about in Adventures of Zoochosis, when he talks about, sink back to my enclosure and well ventilated and adequately plumbed and all that, and it's like, yeah, man, that's pretty nice. You know, I down with capitalism and down with this, and it's like easy to judge all this stuff, but like, you know, I've made a good living working for a giant corporation, and I like living in my house, and I like not having bugs crawl over my face, and I like having air conditioning, you know what I mean? And it's just, for me, that's a part of propaganda. And you touched on it very earlier, or a little bit earlier, where, you know, there's that self-reflection. And that's what I think separates them from just being this political band that, here's what's wrong with the world and screw you, system, down with the government, or whatever, like very surface level anti-conformist type stuff. With like, no, it's trying to figure out how you fit into all that, and acknowledging that there are parts of this horrible world that you enjoy greatly, you know? And that's a big thing for me, you know, a big thing for me. Again, just because I feel like I'm torn in all these different directions, but that's, you know, it's hard to criticize a system that also leads you to thrive on an individual level, right? So I don't know. I think that's part of, that's why I think I picked Adventures in Zoochosis. I think it was really that part of it is like because I felt that really hit me, because I feel a real connection with those lyrics. There's aspects of this that I enjoy, or not just enjoy. I'm a product of this world. For as much anger as I have towards it, I'm a product of it. My way of thinking is still a product of this world. And the things that I enjoy, the basic comforts I enjoy, I'm a product of that.
That makes perfect sense. And I think we just recorded an interview for Refusing to Be a Man. And I think that's the same idea there, but just through a different issue or through a different topic, through ideas of sexuality, gender, the fact that like male, and for me, white male is like the norm, right? Like that's kind of the standard line, that this is something that I'm still struggling to understand how I benefit from, and how my own thinking, as much as I'd like to say that I oppose these systems, they're as much a part of me, either culturally or, you know, through heredity, through my upbringing, all of those things. And it's kind of sometimes hard to differentiate like myself from those issues, because I just clearly don't understand them.
Yeah. And the worst part maybe is when you do kind of understand how you do understand some of these issues, and you do understand the negative, maybe negative is not even the right word, the destructive aspects of these systems. But then, so when you kind of even have a grasp on them, but then you have the realization that you're benefiting from them directly, you know, that's a tough pill to swallow. because then you're like, yeah, at the end of the day, do I want that to change?
Mhm.
You know what I'm saying?
Mhm. And I think that's
And you
probably
think
what.
I'm sorry to cut you off.
No.
You do want the best for everybody else. You really do. But you can't deny that you enjoy reaping the benefits of these things. And there's I don't know, I have a lot of guilt in my life in general. But that just adds to my guilt. I feel like,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
as much as I say, oh, I wish this was different. I wish these are the reasons you have such a comfortable life,
Mm-hmm.
So that's something I need to, I don't know, try to reconcile.
I think the fact that just having the conversation and not settling, right? It seems like the people who are really into this band aren't comfortable with just hitting play and listening and just kind of having, music and message as the background. We may never. It's kind of like how I tell my students that, freedom and liberty and justice in the United States, those things are aspirational, right? Like the Constitution might say one thing, but humans are fallible and humans are selfish and greedy. And maybe this idea of ultimately having some sort of balance or equal representation, like maybe that's eventually still just aspirational. Like we'll never achieve it, or I'll never fully achieve what final vision I like to think of myself, but like maybe the process is just as, if not more important, but I don't know.
Yeah. No, that's a great point. So something you were saying in there though is kind of what I'm trying to articulate here. The idea of these ideas, these concepts, for example, of which are great ideals, which are aspirational, liberty, justice, equality, all these things, right? The thing that I struggle with even more recently is realizing that these ideals, while aspirational, while wonderful and idealistic, they're still a product, right, of colonialism, right?
Yeah.
Which and that's the thing. So it's like we can all sit here and be like, yeah, colonialism was awful and what they did was terrible and this and that. But then even the framework that we work within to judge, even our judgment system, like our metrics that we used are a product of their ideology. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So it's like I'm using the very metrics that they designed to judge their actions. And that's what screws me up.
I think I'm going to be thinking about that idea for the rest of the day.
That's really the thing is like, I feel like, I don't know. I just feel like I definitely see that reflected in Chris Hanna's writing. And that's why another song that we almost chose was Lotus Gate as well.
Yeah.
Because there's a self-reflection in there, you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And that one that touches on, I think that's a great propaganda song too, to show people, because it's like there is a social commentary in that song, but there's also a level of self-reflection in that. And that's to me almost the sweet spot that I want to talk about when if we get a chance to talk about propaganda today. That's like the sweet spot that I want to talk about, that marriage between social commentary and political commentary, but also self-reflection within that. And I think that's what I think connects with me more than anything about propaganda, is that sweet spot right there.
Do you have any other favorite lines from Zoochosis that you want to share?
Yeah, I mean, the very beginning of it, I don't have the lyrics in front of me. I know you sent me the link, but I'm on the phone now, so I had it on my phone. But the very beginning there, I hold out for consensus, right? What is that?
I give the masses the benefit of the doubt.
Yes. And again, that kind of touches on what you were just saying about this idealism. Like, okay, you have faith in your fellow man that we devised this system and democracy and it'll be for the best, but then what do we get out of it? This is what we get. you get that little Donald Trump excerpt at the very beginning, and it's like this is what we get. You know, and my only fear of death is that we have to do this all again. You know, I think, man, it's just such profound writing. Like he really expresses this profound sadness or this conflict within that I'm trying to express to you so poorly right now throughout this podcast. And I'm trying to tell you about my internal struggles. He is so good with words to express this like cosmic level of profound sadness and struggle and lack of faith in humanity. And it's just, he nails it. He really nails it. So that line I think resonates with a lot of people, I would think. You know, you hope for the best, and the democratic process will, you know, this'll save us. And like, no, it won't.
Yeah. So what about the music? Is there anything memorable or special about the performance of the song? Like any riffs, any melodies, the mood, the tone it creates? What stands out to you musically?
Yeah, I think the last part really, I mean, it gets me even emotional a little bit when the song slows down towards the back half, when he's talking to his kids. Like that's like lump in the throat stuff right there. They do an amazing job of just this mood. There's this I don't know, the music just matches the mood so well. There's sadness in it, and there's optimism a little bit in there. And it's you know, like it's too late for me, but you could be anything, you know, man, that like, oh God, that gives me goosebumps. And again, that's kind of the optimism over despair in a sense, right? It's like, it's too late for, that's what there's, I'm sorry, I just have a lot of words I'm trying to get out all at the same time here, but that's almost what what it sounds like to me. It's like, okay, the damage is done for me. It's over for me. But your hearts are pure. The operant conditioners come to break you in, grab your little brother's hand, run like the wind. I mean, shit, man, it's so visual too, you know? You can see it. You can see it. And that's another thing to gush over the songwriting and the lyricism there is some of the lyrics, not just in this song, but they're just so visual. You know, and again, going back to Lotus Gate, which I almost chose, there's just such amazing visual lines in that song. You know, not only the very beginning about the pigeon, you know, flaming pigeon, frozen feet, but one of my favorite songs just for how visual lines it is, for how visual it is, when he says, I'm sorry to jump off this song onto another song, but when he says, as for me, a filigree of psychic police tape tends to cordon off the darker scenes, but the wandering mind stumbles through them and relives them all eventually. I mean, you can see that. You know what I mean? You can see that. I think that's just brilliant, man. Sorry to jump to a different song.
No.
It's again, this is why I struggled so much just choosing one.
So before we go, can you share with our listeners where they can find some information about Sam's or Sami for Syria?
Yeah, they can just, thank you for asking. They can go to just samiforsyria.com, SAMI, for like, you know, FOR, Syria.com. There's, you know, you can donate there. And we recently launched a campaign at the end of last year. We raised money for this new clinic because we did it once before in 2017. And it was just so eye-opening, the power of getting together for a collective goal. Like, it was just so eye-opening, and a lot of good came out of that. We were able to provide, I think, like 11,000 services, and it ran for a year. So that was really great. And now it's operational again. We just launched it, I want to say June, the end of June. It just started again. So any money that's donated there goes to funding it and keeping it well stocked with medications and everything like that. So it's samiforsyria.com. There's videos and information there, and you donate right there. And I appreciate you asking and try to direct people there.
Yeah, we don't ask for donations for our show. Like, we don't make money. We don't have a Patreon. We don't have any subscription. So we don't ask money, you know, for us. So like when we can promote an organization or some cause, we definitely hope that, the listeners, if they've enjoyed us and they've enjoyed our conversations in this conversation, and they are also concerned about these things, that they also would consider donating.
You do it out of love.
Yeah.
It's not about the money.
Right.
It's about the love. Yeah. Well, I really appreciate you having me. And honestly, I feel like I could talk for another hour and stumble over my words for another hour here. But I really appreciate you having me. And I feel like we barely scratched the surface, even on this one song. There's just, there's a lot in there, but there's certainly a lot in all their music. And I think they're great.
Yeah. Well, Sami, thank you for your time. Thanks for talking with us. We're super stoked to have you.
Yeah. Thanks for doing this podcast.
Dr. Chris Jensen, welcome to Unscripted Moments, a podcast about propaganda.
It's good to be here.
Thank you so much for being here. We are absolutely delighted to have you. If you could just spend a moment and introduce yourself and your profession, your areas of expertise to the audience, however you see fit, that would be fantastic.
So I'm an associate professor at Pratt Institute, which is an art and design school in Brooklyn, New York. I had kind of a convoluted trip to being a professor. I actually was a Teach for America teacher for 8 years and went back to grad school. And when I was a Teach for America teacher, I fell really in love with ecology. I had been a biology major, but I got really excited about ecology. And then, of course, ecology has this cousin or brother or sister called evolution. And I got super into those as a middle school teacher, and then I went back to grad school and got a degree in ecology and evolution. So I now teach to art and design students, which is kind of an interesting gig. So nobody that I teach is actually a major. They all are taking ecology or evolution courses because it's part of their general education. But actually, there's a lot of interesting connections between ecology and evolution and the kind of work that my students do. I like to say that my students are cultural creators. They're like kind of the makers of the future culture. And we can learn a lot from evolution and from ecology about like where our culture comes from. So that's kind of my gig at Pratt.
Awesome. Well, let's dive a little into music here as well. So we're gonna talk about music. We're gonna talk about ecology. We're gonna talk about biology, and then we're gonna weave these threads together in our conversation here tonight. So let's start with the reason why we're here. Tell me when you found the band Propaganda and how you sort of like became a fan, fell in love with this very special band that we're all here to talk about.
Yeah, so I was born in 1971, so like the late 80s and early 90s were like kind of my like hardcore punk rock music fertile ground. And I'm a New Yorker, so like I was raised on like New York hardcore. But then I went to college in Southern California, and in Southern California from like, 90 to 93, which is the time I was in school, like very serious DIY, very anarchist oriented punk scene. And so at that time I was into bands like Born Against was a big band I was really into. There's this band from San Diego called Struggle that I really like. So political bands, like bands that I like that were very political. So I didn't, although I've heard a lot of people talk about Propaganda as sort of their like entry into political music, but that wasn't the case for me because there already was this political scene in Southern California and Northern California at the time. So I actually didn't know about Propaganda for a long time they were around. It was not until 1996 I was back living in New York, and I used to do this record label called Mountain, and we put out a band from Montreal called Ire. And this band Ire, their singer Radwan had come on tour in 1996 with this like stack of Less Talk More Rock tapes. And I don't know if he got them for free or if he was just like bought them, but he was like a complete evangelist for this band. And it's funny because like if you go back and listen to the Ire record, which you could probably do on YouTube, like they're just like a straight like heavy dark metal band, but like he just was completely into Propaganda. And I think for the same reasons that I like them, it was like, okay, so I'd heard a lot of political music, but there was a personal side to Propaganda that was brought into the political that just felt so much more comfortable to me. I had spent a lot of time listening to people just like basically hammer you over the head with like social criticism, and I needed to hear that, and it was good to hear that. But there's a soul to propaganda when it comes to the political that really was very appealing. And I think it is the fact that they've always melded their personal feelings and emotional reactions. I mean, the only emotion I really heard from the political music that I had heard prior to this was just anger. And I don't think anger is there's a lot of anger in propaganda, but it's not the only emotion that's there.
Yeah. So your entry point was Let's Talk More Rock for that LP?
Yes. And then I discovered, the LP previous to that. And like, I never liked that one, right? I never had to have that moment. So How to Clean Everything is kind of a funny record to me because like I'm sort of less interested in that. And then I have to actually admit to being a little bit of a Rip Van Winkle with propaganda. And I definitely listened to Today's Empires when that came out, but then I didn't really rediscover them until Supporting Cast came out. So like there's a little bit of a blank spot in there for me, which I've gone back and listened. But like, I mean, I love Let's Talk More Rock because of just what it meant to me personally. But my favorite 3 albums are the last 3.
Excellent. So your favorite are Victory Lap, Failed States, and Supporting Cast.
True, that is true. I mean, it's kind of hard. I admire how you guys can rate things. I'm not so good at that, but I think that that like Let's Talk More Rock is more like this like moment that was really important. But in terms of liking the records, I think Failed States is not my favorite of those 3, but there's somewhere in between. Failed States is not the one that is my favorite, but Victory Lap and Supporting Cast are definitely 2 of my favorite records.
It's really interesting how you say that we are able to rate things because we get raked over the coals for our rating systems, like on social media, like a lot. People are like, why are you rating that? Or they say things like, I completely disagree with your take on How to Clean Everything. And I'm like, awesome. Because that means we're like, reaching people and we're getting people to think and we're getting people to, push back. And like, that's all in like great fun to us. And it's all in the spirit of what this band is about, is kind of like pushing back on stuff. So we do rate things, but we just like, it's just a purely subjective thing that we just like do in the moment on how we're feeling about a song on any given day. And then we hear about it for days to come. So it's really a pretty hilarious system of rating here that we have. A lot of people push back on us with those ratings, man.
Yeah, I'm not pushing back. I'm just not very good at figuring out what I think or what I feel. You guys are very articulate about like your rationale. I'm not sure I have such clear rationales for what I like and why not other things.
Well, okay. So Chris, we are here today because you sent me an email a couple weeks back, and it was a very impassioned email, and it caught my attention right away. And you were like, I really want to talk about Adventures in Zoochosis. If you guys can have me on the show, we can talk about this concept. Can you tell me a little bit about why you reached out to us, particularly about the song Adventures in Zoochosis, the closing track from Victory Lap?
Yeah, I mean, I think that there's 2 aspects to this song that I really love. One is it's engaging with a lot of subjects that are near and dear to my heart as like a evolutionary biologist and a person who's studied and taught about behavioral ecology. So just the whole metaphor that's used throughout the song, I think, is really valuable. But that wouldn't really matter if the song wasn't about something that actually emotionally resonated with me. So I'm a father of 3. I have an 18-year-old daughter and then a 6-year-old and a 7-year-old. And this song like really speaks to like my own struggles in life. Like, I just think that, we can talk about it in more detail, but the brief version of it is like, I experienced this very same feeling of having come from a very utopian, anarchist-oriented punk community where it felt like anything was possible and that we were doing great things like every week and we were going to change the world. And then getting older and having to take on more responsibility, becoming a parent, and then just realizing, oh my gosh, like we so don't have this, and we so are not going to change things like the way we've been working. And also, oh my goodness, now with all my responsibilities, I'm so locked in. And then just like, there's this feeling of like, I mean, I'm not sure, we'll talk more. I'm not sure I have as dark a take as Chris Hanna does on like what it means to be a parent and bring a child into this world. But I certainly feel a huge amount of pressure to change the world, not just for my own kids, but just for kids of all future generations. And so the song just really resonated with me. I like its arc. And I like at the end that it's like a little bit of a kind of redemption after a lot of pretty dark stuff. But I think I also kind of hope that it might be true for me. Like I don't want to have squandered teeth, and I want to try to use them. And I'm feeling like I might not be able to until I get a little older and get free of some of the things that are kind of keeping me captive right now.
I really like that big picture description that you just gave. So let's pull back for a second, because then we'll dive back into what you just said and we'll revisit those thoughts in just a second. So what the heck is Zoochosis, and why does this song have that term in its title? What does this mean scientifically?
So, I mean, I think a zoochosis is a great example of one of those terms where like a scientist has to make up a fancy sounding name, which is great. I mean, it actually, the words zoo, like animal, and chosis, like these work together, but everybody knows about this. If you've ever been to a zoo, you know about this because you've seen an animal that's in a cage that is completely, or an enclosure, maybe it's not a cage anymore, but an enclosure that's just completely out of sync with the environment that it normally exists in. All right. So probably the most obvious of this is large predators. So big cats, polar bears, these kind of really large animals that have huge ranges in nature. So they would usually range over thousands and thousands of square kilometers. They are stuck in these small enclosures, and they will develop these behaviors that are both unnatural and usually generally self-destructive. So it can range depending on the animal, but a lot of times it's pacing is probably the most obvious one. You'll see an animal pace back and forth, just kind of relentlessly. Sometimes it's just lethargy. The animal will just like be sitting there, like kind of sleeping the entire day, which is not a natural thing for, a lot of animals. And then even sometimes things that are more directly self-destructive, like, or negative in their behaviors, like over grooming to the point of like pulling out their hair or damaging their skin. So zoochosis is just this general condition of displaying behaviors that are unnatural because you've been put into an unnatural environment.
Okay. So how does, what is your interpretation of how Chris describes himself like these animals in these zoos? Like, what do you see as the parallel here? Because, obviously we're super used to living in houses, whereas large animals are not used to living in enclosures. So like, to me, the enclosure is unnatural, but the house almost seems natural at this point. So like, how do you feel about this?
Yeah, no, well, I mean, I think you're onto something that's really important there. So I think to really understand this, we have to start to talk about something called evolutionary mismatch theory. So mismatch theory applies to zoochosis in a pretty obvious way, which is that like the place where we've put this animal is completely mismatched to the environment that it evolved to, right? So that makes total sense for these animals. Like you said, it's like a no-brainer. And I think even zookeepers with like good conscience know that they're doing this to these animals. They can't possibly replicate the environment that these animals are in. I guess there would be some debate as to whether zookeepers have good conscience, but we can go there if you want to. I'm sure listeners to this podcast will debate that statement, but people who mean well and who may care very much about the animals, at least in sort of the longer, broader term in terms of survival of those species, still probably know that they're putting the animal in an environment that's just not natural for it. I mean, you can't. I mean, you don't dump a bunch of live prey into a lion's cage, even though that probably, if the cage was large enough, would be the better environment for the animal in terms of its mental health. So then the question for humans is, are we mismatched? And Greg, you said, well, the house is a perfectly natural place to be, right? But a lot of what we've studied in humans is maybe contradictory to that. So how do you figure out what the natural environment of a human is? It's pretty impossible to do, right? I mean, we're such a cultural species. We've constructed so much of our own niche. So this is like maybe the thing that differentiates us from most other animals. Beavers do niche construction, right? They'll make a dam and totally flood an area to create an environment that's more hospitable to their needs. But humans are niche construction masters, right? So we just completely reconfigure nature to supposedly make it more an environment better for us. We also totally reconfigure our own species, right? Like we create rules like you must live in a house, or you should live in a house, or it's better if you live in a house. And those houses are certain sizes with certain number of people living in it. But there's a serious question whether or not that's actually what's best for us. So a great example of this is a scientist called Robin Dunbar did this really interesting study. So what Robin Dunbar wanted to know was, why did primates have big brains? Right? And humans, of course, have a very large brain. Interestingly, it turns out that the brain size itself doesn't matter. It's like the kind of ratio of one part of your brain, which is called the neocortex. It's near the top of your head, and to the other parts of your brain. So if you have a big kind of frontal cortex, neocortex, then that's kind of corresponds to having usually larger cognitive capacity. But for what? Like why have more cognitive capacity? So Dunbar had this theory that like, well, maybe it has to do with being social. So what he did is he plotted the group sizes of all of the primates that they could have from various studies, and then he plotted them against the brain sizes of these primates. And then he extrapolated to humans, because we don't really know what our social group size is. We just know that our brain size is a lot larger relative to these other primates. Mm. And so you got primates that live in groups of 2 or 3. You got chimps that live in groups that are larger, like in the 12 to 20 range, something like that. And then he extrapolated, and the group size for humans was about 150. Right. So not only did this confirm, with some evidence, it's somewhat circumstantial, but still convincing, that there's a lot of evidence that brain size has something to do with being social, but it also suggests that a natural social group for humans is 150 people. Now, when you go to study smaller scale societies, smaller scale civilizations, a lot of these smaller scale civilizations have sizes of about 150 people living in them. Now, this is dicey business, because we shouldn't assume that the people who now live in smaller scale societies are necessarily like indicative of what our ancestors are like, but they are indicative of how our ancestors used to live, and just the size of their societies. I don't know about you, but I don't have like 150 people in my tribe that I can like count on a daily basis to like collaborate with, to have emotional communion with, to have dreams and hopes with. The number of people I actually have to have that kind of relationship with is relatively small. And I don't consider like my social media friends, or even people that I talk to like once a month, to be in that circle.
Right.
And why is that? Because I'm a parent. I live in a small house, like in a nuclear family, and I live in a capitalist society that basically has chopped us up, culturally into these little spaces. And I personally feel completely out of my mind most of the time because of that. And that's one of the reasons why I look back at my punk days. That was the closest to my tribe of 150. Yeah. I had a lot of people I saw on a regular basis. There was always a show. I was always going to it. And I could count on a lot of those people. And I knew who they were, and we collaborated, and we had projects together, and I miss that. And I am resentful that adult world doesn't really allow that to happen. Or maybe I'm resentful of my own decisions to get into captivity in the way that I have.
That is so fascinating, because I often wonder why I struggle with satisfaction and happiness, even though I have literally everything that I need. I'm like, why do I not enjoy being alive? Do you know what I mean? Like, I have everything I want. Why am I not enjoying this? Why is this unsatisfying, unfulfilling? Does that make sense?
So I think the answer is in the song, right? I mean, the answer is that the enrichment program that we've been given, which is lots of stuff that we can consume, plenty of entertainment, and a generally comfortable cage in which we exist, those things aren't actually the things that are satisfying to us. And I would suggest maybe that although I do think that humans are very flexible, we can talk about our flexibility in a second, I think there are fundamental needs we have that we evolved to have, and we are stressed out. We don't feel good when we're separated from those needs. And it turns out a lot of the things that our modern society gives us and tells us is great for us doesn't actually meet those needs.
Yeah. Okay. So let's talk a little bit about the song itself. Tell me about the first time you heard this, if you can remember, and how you made such a deep connection to it, and how you kind of realized what was going on, and how this was connecting to your profession. This is something that is deeply connected to your day-to-day life, and here he is throwing it at you. in song form. Tell me about this experience of connecting with this song.
Yeah, I mean, I don't remember exactly. I definitely listened to it right about when the album came out. But I think the samples really like is the rope for me. And I know that this has been talked about, like how important that sample is to the song. Like that sound of kids playing is so
Mm,
much a part of my life and part of the joy of being a parent, right? So like I have
yeah.
this relationship with the song that's kind of two-sided. It's like it makes me feel the joy of being a parent. It also makes me feel the burden of being a parent. And I want to add even maybe one more thing, which isn't necessarily something I think is intended by the songwriter, by Chris, but like I also part of the reason I feel caged is because of my kids, right? And so like that sample at the very beginning of kids, and then juxtaposed with just the horror of Donald Trump. I
Yeah.
think that's a thing that really kind of pulled me in to the song. But then, yeah, it's the arc of the song, which I've already said. Like I think that the fact that the song starts out really depressing, like it just basically says like, I don't want to live again. Like don't make me do this one more time.
Mm,
And then it goes on to sort of talk about like why that is, and how that affects one's interactions with your kids. Like how do you tell your kids about this world? What do you tell your kids about your own experience in this world? And I totally love it. It's a little overly cinematic, but the end where he just says like, no, I'm going to like, you watch, I'm going to rebel against this. I love that. And I think don't look back, just go. I love that moment. That's just such a
mm.
good moment. Again, maybe I'm just so schmaltzy, but like it reminded me, you're going to laugh, but it reminded me of the part in one of the Lord of the Rings movies where Gandalf has to fight the Balrog, and he's just like, run, you fools, right?
Yeah.
And like there's just this moment where you're like, Gandalf is going to sacrifice himself for the hobbits and the rest of the fellowship. And the idea of doing that for your parent, or for the idea of doing that for your kids is like, I think, a really appealing and redemptive moment for me. Like, okay, yeah, I don't know that I got this life right, and I'm not totally. I know I didn't change anything in this revolutionary way, but like, you got to just keep going until the end with your kids, and for your kids, I should say.
You alluded to this a second ago. Do you think the purpose of the Trump clip in the beginning is to, um, you know, depict the horror that many parents feel about having to tell your children, yeah, this is the person that we've put in charge of this place?
Yeah, totally. And I mean, it's like, he's so representative of like everything that you just don't want your kids to be exposed to, from his obvious like sexual assault that he's perpetrated on like probably dozens of women, to just the way he just objectifies and turns other people into these, he talks about other people like they're animals, right? And just like, so yeah, I think that that particular sample just completely captures the horror of like, oh, what the heck did I just do getting my kid involved in this world? I knew better before I had kids. Like, what a messed up world this is. Why did I have kids?
Yeah, well, what's really interesting about that is like I used to live abroad, and during the Bush years, I was living abroad for a couple of them. And then Obama was elected president when I lived in the UK. And literally overnight, my students in my classroom started speaking to me differently. They're like, oh, yeah, Obama's in charge of the US now. Yeah, America. And like I watched an international group of students of mine literally change overnight how they talked about the place that I was from. And I was their teacher in front of the classroom. And then I was living in Canada for a while. And then in 2011, I was like, okay, maybe I'll go back now. Things seem to be normalizing a little bit. And then I was able to vote in the US for Obama's the 2012 election. And then I had a daughter in 2013. And then and I'm not like over here, like I am definitely not an ideologue, like woohoo Obama all the way. I have plenty of critiques of Obama and his years in office. But then like I bring a child into this world, which is like careening towards climate catastrophe with every passing moment. And I did that knowingly. And I was like, I'm going to have one kid, and God help her, hopefully it's going to be okay. And then we do this thing in 2016, and I'm like, oh my God, why did I have this kid? This kid is like now in this world that is just going to keep careening even more drastically, like all of a sudden. And then I doubted all of my decisions to even have children in the first place, because I was like, oh, it looks like human beings are hell bent on making this place as bad as it can possibly be. Let's just like ran the school bus straight into the brick wall.
Yeah, no, and I mean, of course, like Donald Trump is just emblematic of things that have been going on for a long time. I mean, some of them have come to the surface in some really ugly ways, but yeah, climate change is a good example. I mean, we've known this has been going on for a long time, and at the same time, it's something we haven't done anything about. So that's definitely one of my the things that keep me up at night for sure.
Yeah. Do you have any thoughts on there's a few lines in this song that really stand out to me, and my big standout moment of the song is, Dad, are we gonna die?
Oh, interesting.
And I'm wondering if you've ever had a conversation like that with any of your children.
Oh yeah, no, my youngest daughter is like completely, I think she's over it now, but she like went through a complete phase of just like, she just like get in her head that she's gonna die and just be like bawling, right? But I think as an evolutionary biologist, this is an interesting thing, because like death is such a part of life, and it also is part of like death and reproduction is like why things change over time, right? So like there's kind of an interesting relationship with death when you're an evolutionary biologist, because you sort of, it's like it is the process by which things change and happen, which I'm not excited about. I'm not excited about death, but like I think like it's easier for me to be like more zen about death, I think. But yeah, no, I think that's an interesting line. I'm not sure.
Well, another thing that really jumps out to me in this song is so I was thinking a lot about Chris's thoughts of death, and how he says, I think my only fear of death is that it may not be the end, that we may be eternal beings and must do all of this again. And I was like, oh, Chris, have you been reading like, Hindu scripture in the Bhagavad Gita about like samsara and reincarnation? Because like that is such an interesting line to me as well. And like the older I get, and like how I mentioned earlier that like I have everything I need, but it's like happiness eludes me in so many ways. And I'm just so perplexed by that. And then I'm thinking like, God, do I really like that would suck if we were conscious forever. It's just exhausting to even consider that possibility. And Chris is like feeling like, and within Hinduism, that's like a major concept. It's like an underpinning principle that until you shed your Atman, your internal self of all karma, you'll be reincarnated forever and ever and ever until you have, achieved like this perfect karma, and then you are, liberated from the cycle of reincarnation in this concept called moksha. And so that was super interesting to me that he included that in the song about being eternal beings and how he's terrified of that.
Yeah, I mean, I wonder if Chris Hanna really even, I think this is more to me like just a device. And the device for me is like, imagine we were eternal beings. How much would that suck? How much this world sucks, given how much this world sucks.
Yeah. And that's like a dilemma that apparently people have been wrestling with for thousands of years, because it goes back into some of the oldest written religious scripture that we have in human civilizations.
Sure, but I'm gonna confess to being a materialist, and I don't dismiss any of this because I think it could be very important culturally. But as a person who's like very much a materialist, I have a different conception of immortality, and I think it kind of fits with the song. And the conception of immortality I have is what is really immortal for us is two things: genes, right? So like passing on genes, and that's how like things are not immortal. They were not going to last forever, but they last for a good long time by passing on genes. That's how we have a human species, and that's very relevant, obviously, to the making of children. I'm not going to make the assumption that everyone who would listen to the song would necessarily have biological children. You could be a parent of your children that aren't biological and still really have this resonate, but that's part of it. But the other part that's universal to all parents, regardless if you're parenting kids that are of your own sperm and egg or somebody else's is culture, right? It's like the passing on of culture. And that also is, I mean, humans have these two evolving systems that are constantly in interaction, co-evolving. And that's exactly what the song is actually about, right? I mean, it asks this question: has the cultural system we've evolved gotten to the point where it's like making our biological, not necessarily survival, because we do survive, but our well-being, like our actual experience of being a biological being, completely miserable, right? And that is feasible, that like, because culture has an advantage, it can go so much faster than genetics, right? I mean, think about how many generations of culture happen in one generation of like you to your daughter. And so I think this song is really asking that question, like if it, maybe it's not explicit, but just like how far can we push culture? And it's also trying, I think, to say that like we need to think very carefully about what culture we leave. I mean, that's the horror. The horror is leaving your kids to the same culture. And the song tries to sort of seize that back from the jaws of death by imagining that these teeth are not squandered, that we're going to bite back against this culture and change it. And I think, so when I think about the horror of immortality, it's the horror of like, oh my goodness, am I going to live a whole life and then just damn somebody else in the next generation to live through some of the same horrible things that I had to live through?
Well, and I also love the fact that you think that the ending of the song is super inspiring, because, Chris talks on his podcast about like, being in his like late 40s and like being like, oh my gosh, is my time out to make it any kind of difference? And I love it that he's like, nope, I'm going to bite back. Like you got it coming for you. Like, I'm not done yet. I'm not down. I'm not out. And I'm still going to fight this. You know what I mean?
Yeah, no. And I mean, like, this is where I talk about my kids being a constraint. I mean, I'm not talking about, oh, I can't go and, go to shows every night because I have kids. Like, that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about like when you're an adult and you're responsible for the economic and like physical, emotional welfare of your kids, like you don't have a lot of time to dedicate to activism, to projects. And boy, I sure hope it's the case that like I have this like life arc that's like kind of, as they sometimes say, people have like this kind of mirror image of their life, right? So like, eventually we'll all be like little infants having to be fed somewhere, doddering and old, and that's okay. And hopefully my kids will be involved in making sure that's an okay experience for me. But on the way back to being an infant, I want to be some in my 20s and my teens again. And that means maybe being a little bit more impulsive and certainly dedicating more of myself to changing the world. And, once my kids are out in the world, I'm not going to sit around trying to make their lives perfect for the rest of their lives. They have to be adults and make their own decisions. So I hope that when I'm in my 60s and 70s, that I can just raise some total hell, right? I mean, like I'll be disappointed with myself if I don't do that. And maybe I'm making excuses now for not doing it right now, but I think the captive state of being a parent is part of the way I experience the song, which I don't think is the way that was intended to be written, but that's one of my interpretations of it.
I think that interpretation will resonate with a lot of listeners, though, who are in our 30 to 50 age bracket, who are having all of those similar experiences where it's like we hit the pillow at the end of the day and we're just completely exhausted from having to think about all these things that we do during the course of any given day, with skyrocketing rent and mortgage payments and 10+% unemployment and keeping our children safe during a global pandemic. And it's like the amount of things that go through my brain every single day. And it's like, holy smokes. And now we got to go march in the streets because people are doing obviously terrible things that should have been solved decades and decades ago that we're still dealing with. And we still got to deal with this stuff. And, it's just something that I think a lot of listeners will resonate with, is your interpretation of the song and the exhaustion of being within this parenting generation and having these things that you want to do to make the world a more positive place, and just being like, I'm so tired.
Yes. Yeah. Tired and just not having the bandwidth. I think that's an experience that a lot of parents have. Like there's emotional bandwidth as well as time, right? Like if you're putting a lot into your job and you're putting a lot into your kids, like the emotional bandwidth because really, like, how does this work get done? It gets done not by you going in. I mean, I know sometimes in Chris Hanna's podcast, he loves to talk about like something akin to strapping a bomb to his chest, as he's alluded to in some of the lyrics too. But I mean, I think he would agree. And I definitely, from my past organizing experience, I mean, this is hard work, actually making change. It involves engaging with a whole community and building a kind of solidarity. it's exhausting. And at the same time, it's exhausting. And it's also probably what makes us feel best. I mean, that's the thing that drives me crazy is I feel best when I can do these kind of things and I just don't have the bandwidth to do them. And part of it is my own decisions of like, you know, I could have lived in a way that was more separated from the capitalist society. And I probably would have like unhandcuffed myself a little bit.
Mm. Chris, you've also been a musician for a long time, yeah?
Well,
I mean, maybe it's been a while.
Well, yeah, it has been a while. So my musical years were 1993 to 2003. I was in 5 different bands, all kind of hardcore punk bands. I've come to realize, I mean, I still have a drum set over here in the corner. I still have a bass amp. I still have guitars hanging in my office. But I'm not a musician in the way that a lot of my friends are, which is like they just love to play music. So what I've come to grips with is that I learned to play guitar and eventually bass as well, so I could be in bands and be involved. So, I mean, I enjoy the bands I was in. And yeah, but I mean, that's something I've also lost from being a parent. I stopped being in bands because it just seemed untenable once my first daughter was born.
Well, as somebody who has musical performance experience, what do you think about the composition, the performance of this song in general, besides the lyrics, like all the other stuff that goes into making a song great, like melody, guitar, bass, drums, composition, anything that springs to mind that stands out to you about Zoochosis?
I think a lot of what I like about the song musically has to do with the space that a song actually has. I mean, a lot of propaganda songs have very little space, which I love. I love a song that just like clobbers you over the head from
busy,
A to B. Yeah. Think about like kind of like a lightning bolt song or something like that, where it just crushes you.
Tertium non datur with its like 10 different riffs that's got going on.
Yes, right. So like that, I love that. But I think this song just has a lot of breathing room in it, and that breathing room, I think, musically is valuable. I'll confess, like I can hear the song in my head, but I don't know if I've thought about like its full structure. But yeah, I mean, I think it does a really good job of pacing and leading up to the kind of climax at the end. So I like that aspect of it too.
Awesome. Well, Chris, this has been such an interesting conversation to talk about the concept of Zoochosis, some of your interpretations of this as a parent while also being a scientist and a professor. It's just such a treat to have you on the show to talk about some ways that your areas of academic expertise intersect with some of your favorite music. I mean, it's just so cool to have folks like you on the show to elevate these conversations into a slightly more academic realm, because like I feel like a lot of listeners of propaganda are super interested in the ideas within them, and bringing on experts to talk about these concepts in general and the history of them and the research behind them, it just takes it to a brand new place. So like I'm super grateful to you for reaching out, for being interested to talk about this song, and for coming on and sharing your story.
Thank you so much. I mean, I'm a punk rock fan first, and then the professorial thing is just a way of making myself useful. Give the masses the benefit of the doubt. It's just a democratic process. We'll this population out.
All right, Greg. So, what did you like about my chat with Sami?
I loved so many things that Sami said. His energy is so contagious.
Yeah.
And he is the kind of person that I just like would want to be at a show with. I would want to be around him at a show. He would be the kind of friend that I would look forward to seeing at every show that I went to. And so I really hope that maybe someday you and I get to go see a propaganda show with Sami Zayn. How cool would that be? We would be like the most popular people in the venue for sure, man.
I tell you, as he was talking, like it felt like the Chris Farley show, to where I was super nervous. And even though it's, like our podcast, and I just felt myself relaxing the more he talked.
Yeah. Well, and the camaraderie he talked about of like seeing propaganda shirts in public. I really liked that. I also liked his discussions of growing up Muslim and how not being into music like at first in the beginning of his life, that was so intriguing to me. I loved when he stumped you with the store HMV because HMV was where I used to buy CDs when I lived in the UK, because there was a mall around the corner from my flat where I lived in Guildford in Surrey in southern England. And I used to pop over to the mall and buy all the stuff on CD from HMV all the time. And what was another thing that was really cool is that Sammy saw such a recent show of Propagandies. I was so jealous because I haven't actually seen them, I think, since Failed States. I just think that it hasn't worked out for me to see them in that amount of time. So another thing that really jumped out at me was Sammy talking about his social media engagement. And how he's got so many things to say, but that he finds himself like typing out all this stuff and then being like, what's the point? So, that was really interesting. But, it's like he's got all these things to say, but it kind of reminds me of like in Cop Just Out of Frame, where it's like, who do I think I'm fooling? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, and then he went into a story about the mobile medical clinics, and I'm like, go Sammy, man, that's awesome. So he was really, really cool because he's like questioning his own ability to be effective with this platform that he has, and he's doubting himself, but then he goes out and does this amazing thing. So it was just so cool to hear about that. I also really like how Sammy is drawn to the self-reflective songs of Propagandy. And he mentioned it's like a marriage between like social political commentary and self-reflection. And I completely agree. Like those are the songs that as I age, as I careen towards middle age, those are the ones that draw me in also. So I was super pumped with your interview with Sammy. I thought it was fantastic and I love listening to it.
Yeah, so be sure to check out Sammy for Syria. We'll include a link. And, one thing I think that we definitely like to see is, obviously people taking action and doing and creating and building and, being involved in the world in a meaningful way. So if you can give a little money, be sure to, say thanks to him and us for this episode by helping them out.
Absolutely. So should we go ahead and dive into the lyrics for the Adventures in Zoochosis portion of our episode?
Let's talk about it.
Cool. So this song has like an incredible plot. You know what I mean? In this song, like there is like, to me, there's like a storyline and an arc, but it's all done in just 234 words. And this song to me has the greatest cosmic questions of the universe. Like what comes next? It has like this desire to stay alive as long as possible while also recognizing that much of life is wasted and, procrastinated away. It's also super hopeful that those who come after us can possibly do better. The song opens up with the children laughing, and I still remember the first time I heard this, and it has stuck with me every day since because, we were already into the Trump presidency. So it goes from the children laughing to that disgusting Access Hollywood tape that came out just before the election. And then it goes into the despicable build the wall chant.
Yeah.
It's such a severe range of emotion that occurs in that introduction just based on sound clips.
Whiplash.
Absolutely. It hurts. It is a painful car crash of emotions in that introduction with those sound clips. And one of the things that every time I hear that build the wall chant, I have lived in Mexico. In 2007 and 2008, I lived in Torreon, Coahuila, Mexico, which is like 7 hours south of El Paso, in the middle of the desert. And, I've been on the other side of what would be the build the wall stuff.
Yeah.
I know what life is like there. I know the beauty of Mexico, the fantasticness of the culture, the history, the landscape, the art, the cuisine. And yeah, that chant really just makes me sick to my stomach.
Yeah, the lyrics right out of the gate, for me, it's hard to have hope, despite constantly being fed these narratives of progress. Like there's this upward arc of history, whether that's like the Steven Pinkers of the world arguing that science and reason are going to save us, or the Fukuyamas trumpeting that liberal democracy is going to save us. Well, climate change and U.S. electoral politics right now seem to argue otherwise. And like, I want to believe that people will make the best decisions, but I gotta say, Greg, like in the middle of a pandemic, in the middle of like the election year, my faith is kind of shot. And
the fires, the catastrophic fires.
Right. Yeah.
We've
yeah.
also had multiple severe hurricanes hit the Gulf Coast in the southern U.S. The amount of tropical storms and hurricanes that have been in the Atlantic and the Gulf have gone all the way through the alphabet. Like they've run out of letters for hurricanes this season. It is a spiraling cycle of careening catastrophes, let alone the fact that 50,000 Americans are still getting sick per day and roughly 1,000 are dying per day of directly from COVID or COVID on top of pre-existing conditions. It is watching a train wreck in slow motion, except for the train seems pretty darn fast,
Yeah. And, I keep thinking back to when I was a kid and this fear of death, like thinking what'll happen, and then really focusing on that and almost having this constant thought and wish of like living forever. And, like the next line, I think my only fear of death is that it may not be the end, that we may be eternal beings and must do all of this again. Oh, please, God, let no such thing be true. And that just, geez, what an awful plea. And I kind of thought back to that. If you remember Rocco's Basilisk, it was like a thought experiment that went viral a few years ago about this all-powerful AI that would torture anyone who would imagine this AI were possible, but didn't bring it into existence. Which like everyone was talking about this, and I was like, yeah, either I'm not smart enough to get it, or I don't know. It didn't make sense to me. But like this thought experiment of going through all of this and then doing it again, I don't know. Like that kind of leaves a little bit of a pit in my stomach, and it also kind of, to me, smacks of kind of some religion here. And I was curious what you thought, since that's also your interest.
Yeah. The idea that there could be something after this lifetime, no matter how unlikely that may be, that is something that I'm also afraid of. I'm not a religious person, but religion fascinates me. And if anybody wishes to hear me expound on religion for 175 hours, oh boy, you can find that on the Classical Ideas podcast, which I've been doing for the last 3 years. But for all intents and purposes, I don't personally believe in an afterlife, and I'm completely fine with that. Like, it doesn't keep me up at night. But, the older I get, the more that comforts me that it would be lights out at the end, because I don't want this to go on forever. You know what I mean? So spiritually, I take sort of like a Buddhist, Taoist, Baha'i view of the world. So like if we think about like Baha'i, my Baha'i friends have always told me that if a God exists, I'd prefer that God be the one who allows scientific development to make the world a better place.
Yeah.
So we have like a very pro-science version of God, right? So that seems pretty cool. Second, there's this inherent unsatisfactoriness, or dukkha, in life, which is like the first noble truth of Buddhism. Sometimes that's characterized as suffering, which some people say isn't really a precise translation. Hence, my use of unsatisfactoriness as my preferred term of dukkha or suffering. So third, I love the notion of like the Tao residing in low places. So some people wish to, like, climb social ladders in our very competitive and cutthroat society that we've created for ourselves, where we claw over one another to get to the top. And then when we get there to the top, we're still dissatisfied. Like, you know what I mean? We get everything we've ever clawed for, no matter how many people's faces we had to step on to get there, and we're still miserable. So, as a teacher, I prefer to stay a teacher as opposed to being a principal, because being a principal definitely would not make me happier. And I'm fine with not endlessly striving for upward trajectory, because then you get to the thing that you allegedly want, and then what?
Yeah, right.
So anyway, the notion of being eternal beings reminds me of a Hindu concept of Atman, or soul, which is reborn endlessly in the cycle of samsara, rebirth, until the Atman is free of karmic hindrances. So when Chris is talking about eternal beings doing this all again, you basically do it on an infinite loop, lifetime after lifetime after lifetime, until you have freed your Atman of all karma, right? So it's pretty heavy. And on bad days, like when I'm really tired of being alive, I actually have asked myself, oh God, what if the Hindus are correct? And this has totally jacked up my life I'm living right now. Oh, like, what if this is like step 100? Like, what if this life I'm living right now is like my 100th lifetime with this Atman? And there are a million more of those to come. And I'm like, oh God, no. What if I'm only just beginning my karmic journey? It's totally petrifying. So anyway, samsara is the continuous cycle of life, death, and reincarnation envisioned in Hinduism and other Indian religions. So if you want to look more into that, you definitely should. But the goal of Hinduism at the end of the samsara cycle is moksha, which is liberation from samsara. That's when you get lights out, man. When your karma is gone, when you have eliminated all karma, that's when it's lights out. So Chris in this song is talking about hoping that it's lights out, but he may have a million more cycles to go under the notion of samsara within Hinduism. So it's pretty wild, man. It's pretty heavy.
Yeah, and thinking like, well, why wouldn't you want to do it again? Or, looking at the next couple lines, and it says, though I suspect that if I slink back to my enclosure, safe and warm and adequately lit, sufficiently plumbed and ventilated.
Oh, it's so good.
Let's just say I would not shake a stick. And if pressed, I'll admit I'm ecstatic about the enrichment programs implemented to extend our captive lifespans. I'm excited to see what our keepers have planned. I think Chris has the best use of exclamation marks in all of like punk and metal. Perhaps a bigger cage, longer chains, some compelling novel reason to remain. Like, this metaphor here is so powerful, and it combines, I think, the band's stance on animal rights throughout their career, coupled with like their questioning of power throughout their discography. You have like these two ideas kind of connected together, and I think it's safe to say that power doesn't seem to like emanate from any single individual, elected official or otherwise. And, like Chris sings into people's history, power still calls all the shots. And those elected officials are beholden to the investors and corporations and dark money. But I think Chris here kind of sounds more like Michel Foucault than, say, like Chomsky on Let's Talk More Rock. So, our listeners may be familiar with Jeremy Bentham's idea of like the panopticon, right? This superstructure system. It could be like a hospital or a prison where all of the inmates can be seen by a single person, a single guard. And because they'd never know when they were being surveilled, they were always be surveilled, and therefore they would police each other and each other's behavior. Well, Foucault applied this idea of the panopticon as a metaphor for society, arguing that the main purpose of power is to train people. And in our case, for like people to conform to the rules and expectations of society through this like three-pronged system that fits every part of our life. Like Chris is saying with the enrichment programs, we're given enough freedom to not know we're not actually free, that the chain is kind of long enough so we don't feel like prisoners. So we'll willingly, comply at work or in our community or whatever. Like, there's like hierarchical observation where everybody is actually watching everyone else, pressuring everyone to fit this normalized standard, which takes us to the next part, which is normalizing judgment. What makes a good employee or a good man or a good American? And then there's the examination. Well, like actually determining how well do we fit these standards that other people have set for us. And, I'm not like a philosophy guy, so I can't sit and talk about these ideas at great extent, but just think about how those three elements apply to work, school, interactions with your family, the scenes that we're involved in, social media. And I think with that opening chant of like build the wall, we've already imprisoned ourselves. We're already surveilling ourselves. We're closing ourselves off from the rest of the world. And this metaphor just takes on so much more meaning, I think, with that audio sample in the beginning.
Oh my God, the idea of building the wall to imprison ourselves from everybody else is really, that's very powerful. That's a vivid, powerful thing, because I only want to go as many places as I possibly can and learn the beautiful ways of life and societies from around the world. And here we have another facet of our population who wants the exact opposite, who's like, we have all the answers right here. We're going to build this wall. We're going to imprison ourselves within this square kilometers of this physical piece of landscape. And everybody else needs to just stay out. And we're just building these prisons for ourselves. That's wild.
Yeah, and it kind of just takes that idea from Foucault that we're all active participants in maintaining this power structure, but we're also like not only policing each other, we're building the prison itself.
Yeah, well, man, and I tell you what, like we totally do police each other, and I'm thinking about ways that I police other people right now. Like I live on a residential street in Buffalo, New York, and it's like a cut-through street. And people drive 50 miles an hour past my house all day, every day. And I've never seen the police pull over anyone. I'm like, for God's sakes, just pull over someone. Make the people on my street feel good for once. And like, all I want is to see one person pulled over and get a speeding ticket on my street. And I've been here for 2.5 years and I still haven't seen one. And like, that's me turning into policing all of my fellow citizens and residents of this town. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And, I hear Chris saying in the song, look, I was born into this system and I see the cages that we're in, like literal and figurative. And I just hope for something better for my kids because it's too late for me. I'm used to it. I've given up too much of myself and my freedom and my humanity in the process of conforming, but maybe they can have more than me and maybe they could be more free than I was. And man, that just crushes me.
And I also think about the enrichment programs as something else too. I think about the enrichment programs as almost like the age-old quest for immortality, sort of like in like the Epic of Gilgamesh or something, where like death and dying equals pain and sadness for oneself or others. So living a long time allegedly equals happiness and contentment because I feel like the goal is to live a long time, right? Doesn't really matter about the quality of that time as long as you lived a long life. You're here a long time. You know what I mean? So this is like a confusing proposition because so much of our lives we spend in a state of pretending that we'll live forever. and we zone out, we waste time, we procrastinate, and other things that aren't making like the most of life and what is important. So think about how much time. So this is for all the listeners out there. Think of how much time you wasted today. An hour, 4 hours. What did your last iPhone statistics window pop up and tell you? What did it say? How many hours of your life did you waste today and this week? Like, it's too overwhelming to think about how much time waste there is in a given week, since the average human life is 4,730 weeks long. It's almost like, in order to get people to appreciate life, like a near-death experience would be like a necessary catalyst, right? Otherwise, it seems that most people are perfectly content to while away, waste huge chunks of their lives that they'll never get back. You know, people spend time on conspiracy theories, meme research, and so much like downtime, so much time down rabbit holes. And I'm like, we're busting our butts on medical advancements so that people can spend an extra year of their life scrolling for memes for the perfect takedown to make other people feel badly about themselves, right?
Yeah.
And I'm like, oh my God. And in fact, average smartphone usage per person right now in 2019 was 3 hours and 15 minutes per day, which equals over 1,180 hours per year, which is 49 days. So we want to live longer lives. We have these enrichment programs like medical research, medications, surgeries, etc.
For what?
For what? You know what I mean? So we can waste more time, waste another 49 days a year scrolling, doom scrolling, meme research. So I waste tons of time. You know what I mean? I'm aware of this. I'm not innocent. I'm just as docile and complacent as the next person. It's just that I'm aware of it and processing this in real time. But I have a ton of hobbies, you know, like we make this show. This is insanely satisfying. I make my other show, which is also immensely satisfying. I run, I ride bikes, I go to shows, I teach, I travel, I cook, and I still waste tons of time.
Yeah.
So I'm definitely grappling with a seemingly endless cycle of depression that sucks me down a rabbit hole that, like, before I know it, I've wasted 2 hours. And even though I'm so aware of how much time I waste, why can't I do better? I can verbalize what the problem is and everything. But then I also think about like what people do in order to cling to life, like the suffering people endure, like beat cancer or like fight through rehabilitation after experiencing traumatic injuries, like a paraplegic paralysis, where one day you go on a bike ride and you crash, you become paralyzed, and all of a sudden you're just looking down at the body that you no longer have any control over. That could happen to anybody tomorrow. And the immensity of that. Ugh. But like the uncertainty, like if I would have the willpower to go on is troubling as well. So the suffering people they endure in these moments is unfathomable. So, you know, in thinking about death as well, this song has some discussions of death. And a listener recently sent me the song Real Death by Mount Erie about the aftermath of an unexpected death. And then I think about these enrichment programs, aka medical treatments, that could keep people much better than me alive a little bit longer. And it breaks my heart. And in that moment, I'm also excited about the enrichment programs because I know if I need them, I'll likely be able to access them. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that dad, are we gonna die?
Oh,
You know, I get a feeling here in his like response that Chris is like singing past the fans. You know, this song is a time capsule for his children later in life. And while you and I, and I'm sure the listeners here, find meaning and beauty and value in those lyrics, they're not really meant for us. And we're just damn lucky to be able to hear them.
yeah. And I mean, let's face it, we've all imagined ourselves. If you're listening to this podcast, you've probably fantasized about, you know, being the singer in Propaganda. You know what I mean? Yeah, you picture it, right? And you air guitar,
I'm live. I'm playing shows.
I like my rock and roll the same.
Oh yeah.
You're singing along in your car, and like you're in your head, you are that person singing into that microphone, right?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And touring, playing those shows, feeling that high that you would get from everybody being like, yeah. But you can only write this song as a parent. You can only be the songwriter of Adventures in Zoochosis after having certain life experiences.
Right.
So Chris is a parent. I'm a parent. But imagine I'm living in my head the fantasy of being on tour with my band, Propagandy, all over the world, right? And I'm the singer. Imagine I'm playing a show in Barcelona, and I'm thousands of miles away from home, and people in the band want to put this song in the set list. I don't know if I could sing it, being that far away. Like, I have such a visceral reaction when something sad reminds me of my kid at certain times. Like, I remember reading Lincoln in the Bardo by George Saunders a few years ago, and the death scene of Willie Lincoln comes up in the book, and Abe Lincoln goes to the cemetery, right? He's like cradling the dead body of his son, Willie Lincoln. And I put the book down. It was like 11:30 in the morning. I drove to my daughter's daycare. I said, I'm taking her home early today. And I picked her up and I took her home because I was like, you cannot be away from me right now.
Yeah.
And so I have these moments where I just like freak out, and like I have to have the kid right next to me to just to prove to myself like this is like really happening.
Yeah.
And so if I was on tour with a band, I don't think I'd be able to play this song, because if I couldn't immediately go off stage and hug my kid and say, we're not dead today, or something like that. Oh God, like I'm going to cry right now just thinking about it. It's too much. So, in this song, I love that as a parent. And I also love Chris's reflections about being a parent in his Zoochosis podcast episode on his Patreon, which I said earlier, everybody should go sign up for, to add a little lightness to the moment here. But it's, yeah. And, I love the line, boys, I've bowed to the keeper's whip for so damn long.
Yeah.
And if anybody out there is a good, like, country singer, like a country and western singer, I think this song could be such an intriguing acoustic country rendition. Like, listen to this. Boys, I bowed to the keeper's whip for so damn long. I think the sad truth is this enclosure is where your old man belongs. You know what I mean? Like, I was whoa, dude, I would love to see like a rendition of like a super stripped down, like, country rendition. And I'm thinking about like a voice as well, like Orville Peck or something like that. And nobody can sing like Orville Peck. But that's what I'm envisioning, is like a country rendition, like, boys, I bowed to the keeper's whip for so damn long. And I'm like, yeah, let's do some dancing here.
It's funny you mentioned playing this live. When I saw them last in Chicago, they did. And, I just had such a different reaction to that set list than Brendan Kelly did, who said, he kind of expected them to play their older songs, and he thought it was kind of, thumbing their nose at the fans who would want to hear, maybe like stuff from How to Clean Everything and Less Talk. But when they played this, I was all on board. I was singing along, and it was heavy. And I remember the crowd, like, super into it. And like I said, I think this song pretty much immediately people latched onto. And the first time I heard it, I was walking to work, and it was like lightly raining, and this part here, like where he says, I'll sink my squandered teeth, you grab your little brother's hand, it knocked the wind out of me. And I don't have kids, and I struggle with how rotten and selfish and self-destructive enough of humanity, I won't say most or much, I don't know, it's just enough of people, how how it's enough people to spoil it for the rest of us, and how I'd manage that as a parent on top of everything else. So I can't really speak as a parent, but as a teacher, I do feel like conformity is written into lesson plans and academic standards. And I get so little time with my students, a year to promote critical thinking and to model transferable skills. And it seems like I have really just a short amount of time in my class. And I have them, like I have their attention and I have their like open hearts and minds, but it takes one charlatan, it takes one charismatic podcast host or YouTube, sensation with some grift, right? With some ideology to sell or some hate to repackage to undo what I've done in class to promote empathy and inquiry and introspection.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, your powers as the teacher are very limited, my friend.
Yeah,
it's pretty surreal. How do you feel about the ending of this song where it's got this bookended? So at first he talks about his excitement for the enrichment programs, and then he closes by saying he doesn't care about the enrichment programs. Tell me what you thought about that.
It's like, because like the attention shifts then to the kids, like, I'll be fine, but now thinking and singing to the kids here, like, I don't care about that. I really thought this last lyric was like a quasi manifesto. When he says like, motherfucker gonna get a load of what I got planned. I was convinced we were going to see Chris Hanna like on the 6 o'clock news and his name would be, I'm like, what is he planning or doing, And so then I also thought like, is this a swan song? Like, is this it? I was then later convinced that that's it. There's nothing else for this band to say. And I thought that they would not release another album after this. So I kind of had like this crazy emotion from, all the ideas in the song, coupled with then convincing myself that Chris is going to like, who knows do what. And then thinking, man, I'm not going to have any more music from this band anymore. Even if he doesn't, like, it was like, I said whiplash earlier, kind of back and forth. And like, I don't know how to take the last part of this.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I'm going to think about it a little. I'm going to try and put a little positive spin on that here.
Yeah.
I heard Chris on the Rad Dads podcast out of Edmonton, our friends of the podcast here. And I think that in that interview, Chris was talking about the beautiful things that he's trying to do for youth engagement in his neighborhood in Winnipeg. And so I think that Chris has a lot of beautiful things going on in his life in front of his actual face. Do you know what I mean? Surrounding him. I think that he's almost like committed to the community in so many ways. Like based on my impressions of his talk with Rad Dads, I loved that interview because he's like, this is what I'm doing to make the world immediately around me better. And to me, he's like contributing in a real way that that actually matters, instead of like, shouting about a certain law or something like that. Or a certain war or whatever. He's doing these real things in front of his face in his community. So you know what I mean? So to me, it's like, oh, well, if I die, I die, but I'm putting all this energy into these kids now. And to me, that's really beautiful.
I'm going to undermine your power and authority by doing what's right with these and showing these kids or showing my community, something positive. Like, that's better. And I hope that's the case.
Yeah.
And I feel like I can take away something really, really far more meaningful and admirable, because I definitely didn't have that interpretation when I first heard the song.
And you know what's funny? Like you mentioned, like it being worried it's the last Propaganda record. Every Propaganda record that comes out, I'm like, this is it. It's the last one.
Yeah.
Same with Strung Out. Like every time, or Bad Religion, this is the last one, man. True
Yeah.
North, definitely not making another Bad Religion record after that. You know what I mean? Like I feel like Transmission Alpha Delta, definitely the last Strung Out record. Every time like these bands put out a record, I love them so deeply. Like the Descendants, definitely the last record, Cool to Be You. Oh,
Yeah.
and Hypercaffeine Spasm comes out. So every time these bands put out a record, I like brace myself for the fact that this could be it. So I totally am on board with that. So like when Victory Lap came out, I was like, oh, last Propaganda record, last one for sure, man. And I do that every single time when I love a band that deeply. Yeah. So should we talk about the music a little bit?
Yeah, let's do it. That opening riff, Greg, is like, you know, we keep talking about how the band has evolved, and I think it is the biggest musical surprise for me. So I've been listening to them grow and change since, 2003 when I first heard them. So there are always these elements that I don't expect, but this opening like stunned me. I remember really like mouth agape, what am I hearing sort of response. And, not as much now, but I think when I first heard it, it really reminded me of like the opening guitar, U2's Where the Streets Have No Name. And which is weird because I don't know, like that's probably the only U2 song I could tell you. I don't know their music at all, but there's something about that composition, like just like kind of the echoing guitar chords and it being chorusy, ringing, guitar riff. There's something melodic about it that it really stands out, and it sounds like nothing on any other Propaganda album.
Yeah, nothing. This song sounds like no other Propaganda songs. It reminds me of no other Propaganda songs. Mm-hmm. This song looks hard as hell to not only to create, but to replicate with a full band. Like I've been in bands, my old band Hot Attic, we had a heck of a time figuring out things like where vocals should come in. Playing the drum beat that isn't just boom bop boom bop boom bop or boom bop boom bop boom bop boom bop, like the totally predictable things, and like that's something that this song blows me away on, is that none of the parts come in when you think they're going to come in. The drum beat doesn't feel like you think it should feel, and I'm a very ungifted musician who was in a band with a very gifted, genius multi-instrumentalist who said, we are going to break you of all of your punk rock bad habits and predictableness.
Yeah.
And to me, this song does that for Propaganda. It breaks all of the predictable punk rock, predictable tropes and things that you've heard a gazillion times. The behind the beat feel of the song and the drum makes it a thinker instead of a banger to me. It's an odd feeling song where it takes work for me to get into the music for me, because it isn't like a naturally toe tappy one for me. Like I go to shows and like I bounce one of my legs. I'm standing in a crowd and like I'm like feverishly bouncing one of my legs along with the beat. And this isn't one that I feel like I'd be able to do that with. Like I wouldn't be able to I wouldn't be able to physically groove with this song like I could something like Back to the Motor League. Do you know what I mean?
Right.
Because the drums feel completely different than every other Propaganda song. And it's hard to explain, but if I saw them play this live without hearing this song first a bunch of times on the record, I think I would have a hard time being in the groove of this song itself performed live. And furthermore, this drum beat is super tough. I kind of suck at drums, but I can play a little bit. And this thing is hard. I kept getting ahead on it when I was trying to play it. It reminds me when we were writing songs with my old bandmates, wouldn't let me play the totally predictable beat that I wanted to play. And this kind of stuff takes real work, man. Like when they, like for example, like when they come back in on, I don't give a fuck about the enrichment programs. I'm really amazed that they managed to structure this thing in the way they did, because they keep coming in on these spots where it doesn't feel like they should come in, and they keep starting the vocals in spots where it doesn't feel like the vocals should start, and the
I know what
drums
you
are
mean.
behind the beat, and I'm like, oh my God, this thing is so confusing, but it's so good, and I love it so much.
Yeah, and geez, the contrast with the Hollywood Access Hollywood.
Yeah, Access Hollywood.
The contrast with the Access Hollywood sample cups in. I mean, you have that riff is complex, and I think I always assumed there was like a delay effect during that that main riff. But I was watching a YouTube guitar cover earlier from The Last Note. I mentioned him before.
He's
plays
amazing.
every song on Victory Lap.
I watched it today.
And when I saw that riff, I was like, oh, I just thought it was like an effect.
Yeah.
And then he's like, I can't even like hum it. It's so complicated. And, then there's the chord progression is just super neat and unique. And it has that signature kind of sharp propaganda sound, like just unique chords that I think have like this higher, very like not like what you would expect from punk. And I really think that became pretty prevalent with supporting cast. And I seem to remember Chris saying something on his podcast about maybe not loving all of the final decisions musically with this. I haven't listened to that episode in a bit, but I do remember, like, I've thought for a while, even before that maybe something was missing. Like, say, the song were a puzzle. Maybe there was like a piece missing, or something was in the wrong spot, and that could totally be just my lack of musical understanding, like things kind of fitting in unique and unexpected places. And it's such a minor observation. I've listened to this song. I don't even notice it much anymore.
Mm-hmm.
But I do remember Chris saying like he would have tweaked something, like they felt a little rushed, or it wasn't exactly how he wished he could have ended the song or finalized it. And, it comes to like almost a dead stop. And, Chris sounds like, I think, vulnerable and
totally
sincere, but still exposed. And, for those few moments without the rest of the band behind him, singing about something so personal, man, like I don't know if there's, like you said, I don't know if there's any other song that sounds like this. And then the final moments with those kind of ringing final guitar chords, and they bookend back into the children playing.
Yeah.
It's like back and forth and up and down, and you're just kind of tossed around emotionally with this. But then I feel like they kind of intentionally left you in a good spot.
Thank goodness for ending on the children.
Yeah, no kidding.
There's so much that I love about this song. And there's a performance that I watched of them at a festival called Barna and Roll in Barcelona. And the recording of this is amazing. You can find it on YouTube. But the vibe on that intro is so smooth, and it almost reminds me of seeing like an 80s rock band jam a song introduction. I can see the band's influences in that build-up. I absolutely love Todd's bass under like the chuggy riffs. Whenever the guitars are going dun 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 dun, Todd's going doo 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 doo. I just love that. Oh my gosh. But on the version that I saw, the picture quality is really good. And watching Chris's face when he's singing the song, "Dad, are we gonna die?" He looks like he struggles to sing it live. Like the camera was zoomed in right on his face in that performance on that line. And then he doesn't sing, "But maybe not today." He didn't say that part in the performance, which was very haunting, because if you say you're not gonna die today, that is like, whoo, that's heavy, man. And another live version that I saw from 2017 omitted the entire intro, where George's just on the hi-hats, and then Chris and Sue Lynn are kind of doing the beautiful intro. And they didn't play that beginning part in a version that I saw, and I was so bummed. So if they ever hear this, I hope that the band does the intro in full for forever every time you play this. And I know that this song is also in drop D tuned down half a step, but like there's like this E string bend on just before "Oh Please Lord, Let No Such Thing Be True." There's that wow. I'm like, the tiny touches of like master guitarists are always so pleasurable, and there's so many pinky reaches if you watch like the guitar on these things. Like, oh man, when I remember taking guitar lessons and like they're trying to get me to do the pinky reaches, and like my pinky would just like, you know, turn into a claw, you know what I mean? A weak claw that would just curl down on the side of my hand. And then in this song, like there's just so many like pinky reach flares on the guitar that I just like, oh, I just love it. So yeah, there's so much cool little stuff on this song. But it, like, my favorite thing about this song is that nothing about it is predictable.
Yeah.
Nothing about it is punk rock like formula. It's, and I know that they did say, I know Chris did say in their Patreon that it was a hard one to construct. And maybe he did say there was a few things that he didn't feel right about it. I don't quite remember either. I was listening to parts of that podcast today, but what an unpredictable song.
Yeah.
All the way through. Loved it.
Did you find any YouTube comments?
I did. Yes. Let me see here. There are so many, and there are so many that are so unbelievably good. So here's a few of my favorite ones. I'm just going to skip around within my list. Listening to this was like reading a really great book. Couldn't agree more. I said it earlier, there's like a plot to this song that encapsulates the greatest cosmic, mysteries of the universe, but also the most intensely deep love that human beings can feel for one another. I just love that. So here's another one. Bill said it. Best band in the world, period.
Yeah.
Bill being Bill Stevenson from The Descendants, who recently had a birthday, and who is very well known for his deep appreciation of the song Without Love, where he calls Propaganda the best band in the world. Here's another one. Propaganda has been my favorite band for over 2 decades, and only after having this album for a couple of days, I think I can say with confidence that this is the best song Propaganda has ever written, in my humble opinion. Here's another one. In response to the video of them performing it live that I mentioned earlier, someone wrote, "That would be tough to pull off live," and I could not agree more. Here's my last one. I'm scared to admit how many times I've listened to this song, but what a wonderful feeling to be addicted to a song. The music, lyrics, and especially the vocal phrasing, completely amazing. Propaganda is the best band, period.
Yeah, they definitely seemed pretty in depth. A lot of the comments and that I found as well. One said, "I literally listened to this CD in my truck for a year without ever taking it out.
Awesome.
It is perfect. Everyone I showed it to fell in love with it. Fucking chills and choked up every time I listened to this song. Masterful songwriting." Another said, "This song brought both myself and my 14-year-old daughter to tears. I'm excited to see what our children have planned. Break the mold." And a shorter one more says, "A true bard, Chris is."
Love it. Keith, what's some takeaway that you have for this song?
You know, there are conditions that I'm willing to tolerate for myself. But what about for my loved ones? You know, my wife, my students, future generations. This song makes me think about the hopes I have, you know, not just for myself, you know, since I don't think many of these changes are going to be possible in our lifetimes, but, you know, what could be, what is next, and how complicit am I in this system of compliance and complacency? And what am I willing to give up so that others can have something better? It makes me think about all of those things, and I don't have any lesson or I don't have any words of advice. I just have questions. It's just things that I'm thinking about and struggling with.
This song is telling me to not just accept it, to not just lay down and accept that my periods of apathy or discontent or depression are the way it needs always be. Chris is challenging me to raise my kid to grab life, to love hard, to push for everyone to have access to the things that they need that will help us all get the most out of life for the short period of time that we have. I'm almost 37. And so what if 37 is all I get to, you know? It's important to ponder and reflect and put things into a big picture context of what if this is all that there is? Do you know what I mean? So I'm committing, you know, based on listening to this song over and over for the last few days to commit to not having my spirit completely broken. Better things can occur. Better things for all people can occur. There are a lot of people out there whose goal it is to make other people feel badly every single day by making fun of people for their views, making fun of people for their hopefulness, making fun of people for their encouragement for a better life for all. And that's just not what I'm about. So even if better is not in the cards for me necessarily, because, you know, I am in my enclosure right now. I'm not cold. I'm not hot. I'm not hungry. I'm not thirsty. It's all in my enclosure here. Here it is. But even though I have my enclosure, you know, I still have a spirit that I can latch onto to try to make things better. So even if things don't really get super tons better for everybody within the course of my lifetime, it's incremental, and I believe that it can be. So I'm not going to let my spirit be crushed. I am going to keep trying to make things better. You want to go ahead and rate this bad boy? I know what you're going to rate it. Can't help it.
Yeah, this is such a dynamic and complex song, you know, on top of lyrics that I think anyone struggling with the news or just existence would relate to. You know, you don't have to like punk or metal to connect with Zoochosis. And seeing the massive response to this online, live, you know, in concert is reassuring that I'm not insane. I'm not alone. I stand with probably most other Propaganda fans in that I'm giving this a 5 out of 5.
Can I give it a 10 out of 5?
I'll allow it.
Remember when I gave Ska Sucks like a 0.5 out of 5?
Yeah.
Can
you take that leftover?
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So yeah, perfect song. Absolutely love it. And I am just so grateful that this song exists to see me through my early parenting journey. Couldn't have come at a better time for me. Kid was born in 2013, and this song hit me in 2017. And, you know, right as my child was like really getting into like exploring the world and just having her mind blown all the time, getting ready to start school, having like tons of great preschool friends. It just hit me right at the perfect time. So love it. Love everything about it. So that is our chat on Adventures in Zoochosis from Victory Lap. Hope you enjoyed our conversations with Sami Zayn and Dr. Chris Jensen. Thank you so much to both of you for taking time out of your lives to appear on our show to talk about this incredible song and your fandom of Propaganda. If you would like to follow us on social media, you can find us on Twitter at PropagandaPod or on Instagram at PropagandaPod. We love hearing from you. If you want to drop us a line, you can reach us at propagandapod@gmail.com. Thank you so much for listening, and we'll see you next time.
I'm excited to see what our keepers have planned. Perhaps a bigger cage longer chains, some compelling novel reasons to remain. Then are we gonna die? Yes, son, both you and I. But maybe not today. Boys are bowed to the keeper's whip for so damn long. I think the sad truth is, this enclosure is where you're